Welcome to my Self-Care Shit, the podcast, where we talk about what true self-care looks and feels like. I'm your host, Kathy Love, two-time TEDx speaker, author, and self-care coach. Each week, we'll have honest conversations on how to create the peace and stability we crave in our lives. My guest today is Lauren Lefkowitz. She's an executive coach who makes it comfortable to get uncomfortable, create powerful goals, and create real sustainable career and life transitions. She is also a fractional chief human resources officer, and she is also a friend of mine. So I am so excited to have this conversation with her today. I am so excited to have this conversation with you, Lauren, and I have been waiting since we met at the Heroic Public Speaking core class that we were both at in February, I think, which was a really powerful experience for me. And I ended up using a lot of what I learned in my last TED Talk, which was really a gift. But one of the most memorable parts of that weekend was the conversation that I had with you when we went to dinner afterwards.
Yes. Yes. I loved our conversation. And I remember at the end of it telling you we're friends now. Like,
Yes.
once I meet somebody and I really like them, I don't walk away without saying that, because I think we do a lot of dancing around each other in human nature and wondering if we should say, hey, I really like you, or if we should see if we have a networking call to follow up. And I just say it outright. And usually, in fact, I haven't had a situation yet where somebody has said, ooh, I don't want to be friends with you. And so it just moves things faster in relationship building to just come out and say, like, I'm having so much fun. Now we're friends.
And that is such an act of true self-care, to be able to say that without the fear of what will they think of me? What will they say in response? Do they like me? Am I worth, all of those things that we struggle with. And the codependency part that is the opposite. That is the true self-care, when we can just say that and trust in how we know ourselves to be and what we have to offer, and that we're okay. Even if somebody did say, yeah, no thanks, we'd still be okay.
Yes, absolutely.
But I love that you said that to me, and that was not an option. We're going to be friends. It's taken us a little while to get on the call, but that's okay. You can tell I've been talking a lot today. I may need a little water.
Yep.
But while I am taking a little sip of water, can you tell the story that you shared with me that was a real life example of being almost, I would say, forced into learning some self-care?
Yeah. I grew up in the corporate world assuming that self-care was for other people and that my job was to make it easy for other people to care for themselves. So most of my career was in corporate HR, and I put myself last in the order of things that needed to get done and get taken care of. I was an 80 plus hour a week worker, chronic hand raiser, very much in practice as a people pleaser, first and foremost, and for sure a workaholic. The compulsion to do that and to be in everything came a little bit from just natural people pleaser tendencies, came a little bit from expectations of how women are supposed to be. And I put supposed to be in quotes in the workplace. And then also, I live with a number of chronic illnesses. And my way of combating that was to give so much and perform so highly that nobody would question if I were too weak to do the job. I was at a point where I had started looking for new jobs because I didn't want to be where I was anymore. And I assumed that if I switched jobs, somehow magically I wouldn't be a workaholic anymore. What I didn't think about in that moment was wherever you go, there you are. I
Hmm.
had taken myself from another company to this company, and I only worked more hours at the company that I was at for 5 or 6 years. And I was at home one day working on a 401k plan redo with the company I was working with. I had just done this big overhaul of my condo, trying to make everything perfect and orderly so that if that stuff was all in order, then I could focus on my career and figure out what was next for me. Well, while I was perfecting my home, I was running my Roomba vacuum around the condo and doing my work. And out of the side of my eye, I saw the Roomba going for the plug of an unplugged glass lamp. And I foresaw disaster. I thought the Roomba was going to catch the plug, the lamp would fall down onto my wood floor and smash into a million pieces. My dog would get all up in arms about it and run over to try to see. I pictured a bloody mess for all of us. And so I ran across the room to try to catch the vacuum in its steps. And instead of catching it, I slid in my socks on my wood floor, reached out in front of me to try to catch a table that I thought I might have been close enough to so that I wouldn't fall flat forward. I was not close enough. I fell flat forward, landed with my arms overhead, and broke both of my shoulders. The Roomba did its job and turned when it sensed the plug, and my dog sat calmly on the couch, waiting for me to figure out what was going on. I sat up immediately, I think just from adrenaline, but then I realized I couldn't stand up because my arms weren't working. It turned out I had broken both of my shoulders in this act of trying to do all of the things all of the time, all at once. And, uh, fast forward, I was out of work for about 4 months while I lived in nursing homes and had home health care to recover enough to do things like feed myself, go to the bathroom by myself, etc. And when you go from this hyper independent, high achieving, hand raising mentality to not even being able to scratch your nose, it is incredibly humbling. It is incredibly jarring. And it makes you rethink everything. And the first joke from my friends was, look who can't be a hand raiser. The universe literally took away my ability to hand raise. At the time that I went out with this injury, I was interim managing a department while I was looking for that department's new vice president. I was managing my own stuff. I had taken on two or three other departments that shouldn't have been mine, but the company didn't know where to put them. So I raised my hand and I took them on. I don't know how often you hear about HR managing the meeting and conference department, but that was under me for no good reason except for that I volunteered. And I knew during that time that something needed to change. That if I was able to be taken out of my life so abruptly, that there had to be something different ahead of me other than 80 to 100 hours a week and fitting in groceries on my way home, in between closing my laptop at the office and opening my laptop when I got home.
That is the most dramatic, for a lack of a better word, but truly a dramatic example of I believe in the universe, um, creating situations that aren't always what we want, but always what we need. Do you ever look at what might have been options for you in that time when you were just going from one thing to another? And I love the visual of closing your laptop at work and opening it at home because I think a lot of people identify with that and can recognize that. But were there signs, is what I mean? Were there nudges or were there moments when you considered making changes or doing something different before this kind of drastic experience forced you into it?
I would like to give you the very noble answer that I knew and I was working on things and I was elevated. No,
Yeah.
I was completely dissociated from what I was doing to myself. In fact, I was so removed from the idea that I had any control over my time, over what I took on at work, over the boundaries that I set with work and family and friends and whatever. I was so oblivious to it that I was living this sort of martyrdom of everybody's counting on me. There's nobody else who could take it over. It was reinforced for me when I came back because four people were doing pieces of my job. Four people took over about 50% of my job. And the day that I walked back into the office for the first time, and I was only allowed from my physician to work for 2 hours a day that first week that I was allowed back in the office. When I walked back into the office, two of the four people like walked into my office and tried to hand me all the folders of things they'd been working on. And I, for the first time, set a boundary. And I said, I need you to give me a couple of weeks. I'm only allowed to work 2 hours. But even that boundary was like, look at me. I'm clearly physically hurt. I cannot do it. I functionally cannot do it. And that was the only reason it felt justified to me.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah, was like, I have an excuse that people can see. And before, when I was only dealing with my chronic illnesses, nobody could see that because I look normal from the outside. And so it felt justified to me to say that and to give a time frame of a couple of weeks, which really needed to be a couple of months before I was like full time again. And I felt incredibly guilty for setting that boundary. I knew that the work that was doled out to certain people wasn't necessarily the right work to the right people. So there was going to be a lot of cleanup. And I pretty immediately, as soon as my arms could handle it, I pretty immediately went back to my 80-hour weeks. So I would love to tell you and all of your listeners that like that epiphany of I can't live like this anymore and I don't have to, and I don't have to be the hand raiser, and look at how my shoulders don't even work. I can't even do the work anymore. I would love to tell you that my realization led me to this delightful montage of ways that I set boundaries immediately and came into my own and figured out self-care. It didn't happen that way. There's a lot of yada, yada, yada in our stories that bring us to where I am today, which is 6 years in the making and totally worth the work. Not really worth the agony that got me to the work. I wish I'd found another way to do it. But I also don't think I would have done this work this way if I hadn't been just literally thrown down to the ground.
Right. Right. And that is I'm actually, I like that people are hearing that side of the answer, because a lot of times we hear the perfect story, the perfect ending, and knowing that you're human and that it wasn't this overnight change and everything was so much better is more realistic. I think it's something that people can identify with more. And also knowing that you were, I use the word denial a lot in the healing from codependency. There was a lot of denial to how life was actually happening for you, and likely how your body was reacting and how things were playing out for you. So sometimes people don't understand what denial looks like. They think that they know it, but they're not willing to admit it. It's that they don't even know it.
Yeah.
They don't even realize it. That's how powerful the denial is. And I always talk about how, because you're giving such a great example in the workplace, how when we're struggling with codependency and a lot of what you're talking about, not having healthy boundaries, not speaking up for yourself, all of those things fall under what I talk about in the codependent part, is that they also are often showing up in personal relationships. And so to correlate that a little bit, people will say that they were in a toxic relationship, but they waited for something that gave them an excuse to leave, that they could tell their friends and their families, well, this person did this or said this or this happened, so now it's okay if I leave, without feeling like just because they know that it's not right or healthy for them, that that's not enough to say.
Yes. Yeah, I think deciding to make the choice for the sake of the choice serving you feels really selfish. And we as a society have decided that selfish is a bad word. In its definition, selfish is just serving yourself. But we make it such a punishable offense to look out for ourselves, especially when we are so wrapped up in all of the ways that we're pleasing others, that the idea of setting any boundary, of saying, I can't, or no, thank you, or that's not my job, in any way, shape, or form is going to come across offensive. It's going to come across entitled. It's going to come across lazy. Lazy is my hot button word. I never want to be seen as lazy. And I had to come to terms with, if I'm going to set a boundary and somebody is going to call me lazy because of it, I have to have the internal knowledge that that is not laziness, that that is
Exactly.
smart and careful and thoughtful boundary setting.
Yes. And it's unique for each person. Your boundary could be completely different from someone else's boundary. It doesn't make either one right or wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And figuring out what I even wanted my boundaries to be was a whole path to figure out. It was a whole, almost like a research study on myself, because my knee-jerk reaction always was to help, always was to give as much as I could. What that led to was that I went way above and beyond at my corporate job. I did free coaching on the side for people who just needed it. I did not see that as as an income I did not see that as an income generating opportunity for myself. I saw other people out in the world generating income based on executive coaching. And I thought, good for them. I wish I could do that, but I can't. Talked myself out of it before I even thought about doing it. And in this boundary setting process, I had to start with the external factors of, if I'm going to charge someone for this work, and not just like, oh, whatever you want to pay me, or what are you thinking about, but actually put a strategic business plan into play. I couldn't charge one person for executive coaching services and not charge another person. Like, that didn't match up with my integrity. So initially, that external need for boundaries is what drove me to start setting those boundaries. It then became more internalized through practice, through therapy work, through work with my coach. And now it comes fairly naturally to me. But there are still times when I recognize, well, gosh, I was just talking to that friend for an hour, and 45 minutes of that was me just doing a little free form HR consulting. It's still a trap that's so easy to fall into.
I will often have people start by looking at places where they're saying they can't do it anymore. They're feeling taken advantage of. There are certain phrases like that that I have them to start noticing. Are there any specific phrases that run through your mind, or something that are a clue to you that might be helpful to someone else?
I think with my clients, and I bet you find this with your clients, because I think we probably attract similar giving types of people to work with. I think the thing that I find with my clients is they want to go straight to the doing. Like, okay, Lauren, how do I fix this? Well, what are we fixing? Right? Like, step back. And so with my clients, I work through a path of notice, then decide, then do. And what I notice with my clients is like a lot of game planning to do the doing without really exploring why they want to do the doing. So, for example, if I have a client who doesn't know how to say no, first notice what the things you're saying yes to are and what bothers you about having said yes. That's the first notice. Then we get to decide, well, what's the reason that you feel this way about these different things that you're saying yes to? And sometimes we get to, I don't want to be saying yes to any of it. And sometimes we get to, well, I would love to say yes to things 1, 2, and 3 if things 4 through 10 weren't bogging me down. So it's getting that distinction of from what you're noticing, where are we making decisions? And then how do we do it? And how do we start practicing the simplified no? Not the, no, I can't really do it, but if you come back to me next week, right? No is not putting off the conversation. No is making a firm decision and sticking to it. There's a lot of fear in that. And when we jump right to the doing of no, or whatever boundary we're trying to set, or whatever self-care plan we're trying to implement, like just for us, there has to be a deliberate pause before we execute. Otherwise, we're just sort of haphazardly trying to undo what we've built, and we're not really going to feel good about it. So it's really that slowing down and then that backtracking. Notice something else, because when people come to us for support, they want a full recreation of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And what we don't always talk about is how we're being in things, right? So if you're going to go ahead and bulldoze your way through your new boundaries, your new life plan, your new career plan, whatever it is, you may do all of the actions, but the being part of you is still sitting where it originated, feeling guilty, feeling like uncertain whether you've made the right decisions, feeling like you didn't make enough of a plan that people will understand what you're doing and get on board with it. And so often if we're just going straight to the doing, we almost immediately revert because we are sorry that we've done it, because we're ruffling our own feathers and we're ruffling everybody else's feathers.
So great. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the pause. So when you're talking about that pause, that's when I'm talking about taking that breath,
Yes.
which is the pause. And both of the cue to pause or to take a breath is to see how you feel, to just see how you feel before you start to do. And you mentioned the fear, and that you mentioned the backlash when you set a boundary of the names or the things that somebody may think about you or say to you. There's also in the workplace that fear of losing our job if we don't do certain things. And we talk a lot about getting our body out of that state of fight or flight in response to a threat. And in modern day, I think one of our biggest threats is at work. When we're afraid of losing our job over something, it threatens our ability to live in society and to pay our rent and to feed our children, if that's the case. And so I think that fear of loss, and again, in a relationship, the same thing. Sometimes people are afraid to set a boundary because it'll ruin the relationship or they'll lose the relationship altogether. It's that deep knowing, like you said, about I'm not lazy. It's that deep knowing I'm not lazy. And on the other side, it's that deep knowing of I'll be okay no matter what. This has to be okay and healthy for me. Otherwise, it's just never going to, it's going to end in some type of disaster, either
Yeah,
emotionally or physically.
absolutely. And I think we do a good job when we are people who don't focus on self-care and therefore are focusing all of our actions and energy towards pleasing others, serving others. One of the things that I think we do is that we separate mind, body, soul. So, one of my lessons that's still ongoing, and I work on it in therapy, I work on it in my friendships, I work on it as I'm preparing work related things, is that mind, body, being connection. I will notice that I am in a therapy session and my therapist will ask me, how are you feeling about that? And I will stop and explain all of the whys, why I'm doing it this way and why I didn't do this and why I didn't set this boundary. And my therapist will come back and say, and how do you feel about that? And then I'll talk about what I'm doing to fix it. And it's so easy for me to catch with my clients, but we cannot be self-objective.
Yes, I understand this
And
very
there are
well.
times when my therapist will literally bring out the feelings wheel. And if you don't know what the feelings wheel is, it's brilliant. It's a wheel of every core feeling and then the sub feelings that come out of that so that you can really identify how you're feeling about a thing you're doing or talking about. And we will literally bring out the feelings wheel so that I can distinguish, am I angry or am I sad? Am I afraid? Am I happy? Because it's not something I was taught to be in touch with.
Right.
And in fact, it's much faster if I'm not, which
Right.
is, awful, but I can get through my day in a really efficient way, especially with work stuff, if I'm not interrupted by all these pesky thoughts and feelings.
Right.
And my life, though, is so much richer because now I'm in touch with those. And I do catch myself, and my therapist catches me more quickly, and I'm able to then reconcile not just the doing, but the feeling and the being.
And that's practice, right? That takes
It is
practice.
absolutely. One of my coaches once said to me, I have perfectionist tendencies. And I was talking to this coach about it, and she said, Lauren, it's a practice, not a perfect.
Hmm.
And it's that lives in my head rent free. I think about it all the time when I'm trying to get everything done for everybody. And now I try to fit myself into all of that. So it feels sometimes like extra responsibility. And to be able to step back and say it's a practice, not a perfect. Yes, I wanted to meditate for 30 minutes this morning. I had time for 5. I still did the thing. I'm in practice. Did not go the way I intended, which would have felt perfect. But here we are. I got to breathe today. And I didn't say, well, 5 minutes isn't good enough, so I'm not doing it. I did the 5 minutes. I got some breaths in. And tomorrow I'll aim for 30 again.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, it's all practice. I'm definitely practicing on using my feelings instead of my words. I'm so good at describing and rationalizing and using my words to think away or talk away the feelings without being actually connected to them. So, yeah, another just a great point that I'm glad you brought up. Can you give us some ideas about how you do take care of yourself now? I mean, you've said a few of them, but are there things that you really rely on now for your self-care to create those boundaries to make sure that you're in a healthier place,
Yeah,
steady?
it's a great question. One is that I try to meditate a few times a week. I was never a meditator, And in fact, I would try it sometimes and I would like open one eye to see how long I'd been meditating, right? Which is not, that's not the practice. So I had to work up to it. I've learned that certain types of guided meditation work better for me because focusing on nothing is incredibly hard for me. My brain immediately starts thinking about all the things that need to get done. I also love sound. So I'm in a community of a group that does meditation followed by a sound bath based on the direction I was given in the meditation part. I'm able to use that in the sound bath and not get distracted. I try to sleep 7 to 8 hours a night, which was something I would skip in the past. And also because I was under so much stress and chronically ill, I would then have to sneak in naps in the middle of the day where I could, and then crash on the weekends in between also catching up on work because you don't get 80 to 100 hours in a week in if you don't also include Saturday and Sunday. This is not advice. Don't do that.
Right.
I also I rely on my friends a lot more than I used to. I used to be the listener and the helper and the fixer. And I thought again that that was my role. And I have learned to put trust in other people and share my stuff more and be clear with my friends. I'm just venting, or you need your help with this, or what do you think about this thing that I'm doing, or whatever that is. Therapy is a huge practice for me. I've been in and out of therapy throughout my whole adult life for different reasons. And I've been in therapy for the last couple of years consistently, really working deeply on PTSD, complex PTSD, anxiety, depression, and recently got diagnosed with ADHD in my late 40s. And also having some sort of accountability partner in everything. So I've got people who are looking out for me to come to the meditation group. I've got people who will reach out and say, hey, I haven't heard from you in a few days. You good? I have people like my coach and my therapist who expect me to show up for things. I have a business partner who does creative operations work who will nudge me and say like, hey, we've put this deadline off twice. Do you want to still put it off or do you want to move into it? And keeps a running list of all of my harebrained ideas about what I want to do and haven't gotten to yet. So I think accountability and support are so much more important than we give them credit for. And none of us is so hyper independent and highly qualified, no matter how highly qualified and hyper independent we are, that we can't allow support. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do for people who don't focus on self-care. I also get myself little treats. And this is an area that was really hard for me. Like I had this mentality that I don't deserve rewards for like just being a living human who does what I think I'm supposed to do. But every time I have a new client, I celebrate that. I have a little playlist on, on my music app that is for that moment when I've got the signed contract and I'm ready to celebrate. Depending on the size of the client I get, I've got rewards in my head for, what I get from that. Last time I got a new client, I sent myself a box of chocolates with a congratulatory note. And these are things that I might have done anyway. I might have looked at that chocolate company and said, hey, I want this stuff. Or I might take myself out to dinner in celebration of something at a place where I've gone to dinner before. But we are worth celebrating when something good is happening. We are also worth getting ourselves a little consolation prize if something doesn't go the way that we want to. And it can be something mundane. What's important is that we attach importance to it, right? So like if you go out to dinner for your birthday, you probably are going out to dinner at a place you've been before. And you've just been for regular meals. But you're going out for your birthday, and you're going to remember in 6 months that you went to that restaurant for your birthday with those people. You've attached importance to it. So you get to do that for a cup of coffee, for stickers or coloring book for yourself, which are perfectly reasonable and fun adult activities. For, getting through something hard, you get to decide that you are going to celebrate and how you're going to celebrate. And I think so many of us don't give ourselves that acknowledgement. We wait for it to come from somewhere external. We wait for someone else to tell us we did a good job. And we don't have to do that. We get to celebrate ourselves in any way that we see fit.
I could not love that anymore. I love that idea. And I love that you gave different options of, if somebody's saying, well, I don't have the money to order myself some chocolates or a gift, to play your favorite song and just remember to celebrate and take that moment to do that. I love, love, love that.
Yeah,
It's really showing ourselves that we are special and important and deserve that. I love it. Just like we would celebrate for someone else. Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's also why if I send myself a gift, I include a gift message
I love that.
because I would do that for someone else. And if
Yeah.
someone else is congratulating me on something, they might send me just a note, right? That's just a stamp or an email. We deserve self-acknowledgement the way that we put it out to others.
Well, and the great thing with our ADHD brains is we forget we sent it to ourselves. So it's a great surprise when we get it in the mail.
So true.
So can you tell a little bit about your Fine as a Trap? Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So Fine as a Trap coaching came from a rant, actually. I was talking to my business coach about the type of clients that I attract. And I said the most common thing that they all say is that they tell me something that's hard and then they tell me why it's fine. It's fine that I have all of this work. It's getting me the experience. It's fine that they're not promoting me now. They gave me a little bit of a raise. It's fine that they promoted me and didn't give me a raise because I'm getting the recognition, right? So we justify why things are fine for things we absolutely don't feel fine about. There is no fine. There's no neutrality in how we feel about our lives, our careers, the people around us. There's fine can be for your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I don't want to think about my sandwich 6 hours after I've eaten it. It was probably fine. But the way that we feel and the way that we come into our lives isn't fine. And if you're saying it's fine, it's pretty terrible. And if you say it's terrible, then you kind of have to do something about it. And that's really scary. And so fine is this trap we put ourselves into because we don't think we're allowed to have better or different, mostly because we don't know how to get to that, or we don't feel confident that we can give ourselves permission to do that. And so we justify that it's fine because we probably will break down in some way whenever we get to the point where we admit it's not fine. And by the time we're willing to admit that, it can almost feel irreversible. It's not. I think everybody has an opportunity to build what they want to build, but we can get to the point where it feels so bad that it doesn't feel like there's anything we can do about it.
Yes, I'm glad you said that because so many people, especially when they come in for coaching in 40s, 50s, whatever the age is, no matter what age, people feel like, well, I've done this my whole life. And so, this is the way I'll always be. And that's just not the case. So you have a free Fine as a Trap inventory, correct? So I will put the link to that in the show notes and also how to reach you at your website and on LinkedIn and all of that so that people can connect with you.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank you for this conversation. It was just so much better than I could have even imagined, and I knew it was going to be a good one. So thank you so much for being here today. I am so grateful that I got to meet you back in February, whenever that was at Heroic.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been such a pleasure. And I was so looking forward to this conversation because I think the work you do and the work I do is so aligned. And we are both proof that we can really care for other people and very strongly serve and elevate other people, and also be aligned with that ourselves.
Great job making time for yourself today. Be sure to subscribe to my Self-Care Shit, the podcast, wherever you listen in. Your 5-star review will help get this show to whoever needs to hear it. Go grab your free daily self-care checklist on my selfcareshit.com. Please take the last minute of this podcast for yourself to listen to the ocean waves and breathe.